I've told this story maybe 40 times now. To my siblings, to my mate, once to a whole room of young cadets who didn't believe a word of it until an old officer in the back stood up and said, quietly, "It happened. I was there too." So let me tell it to you properly, from the start. My name is Cavil. I'm Thren, you'd call us the stocky ones, 4 arms, skin like wet river stone. Back then I was young, 16 station cycles, awkward in my own shoulders. And I was a student at Brightwell, the integration school bolted onto the underbelly of Tolly's Anchorage, which is a trade station spinning slow and quiet out past the Corward lanes. You have to understand what Brightwell was. It was where the galaxy's leftover children got sorted, not the rich ones, not the pure-blood academy types, us. The mixed species kids, the refugees, the ones whose parents worked the docks and the recyclers and the hydro decks. 41 species in one building. Can you imagine? 41 ways of breathing, 41 ways of eating. Some kids photosynthesized in the atrium and some kids ate rocks and some kids couldn't be in a room with certain smells or they'd pass out. And into that mess, 3 cycles before my story, the galaxy had let in the humans. Nobody wanted them there. Not really. I'll be honest with you because this whole story is about being honest. We thought they were animals. Let me back up and tell you about the gravity. Tolly's Anchorage ran at what the council calls Standard 1, full weight, comfortable for most of us. Comfortable for me, certainly. Thren evolved on a heavy world. We're built like door frames. But not everyone. There was a species at Brightwell called the Loth. Beautiful people, if you ask me. Tall and thin like reeds, with skin that shimmered faint blue when they were calm and went pale gray when they were scared. Their bones were hollow, not weak, exactly perfect for where they came from. They evolved on a little moon called SAE, barely any pull to it at all. Their whole world drifted. They didn't walk so much as glide. Put a Loth in full station gravity, and you're asking their skeleton to do something it was never built to do. It's like asking a bird to carry a stone in each wing and keep flying. Most Loth families who came to the station could afford grav harnesses. Little exoframes, expensive, sleek, made you look almost normal. Asa's family couldn't afford one. Asa. I should have said her name first, really. She's the whole reason I'm talking to you. Asa was small even for a Loth. 15 cycles. She had a repulsor chair, a battered old thing, second hand, third hand maybe, the kind of hover chair that whined when it turned and drifted a little to the left if you didn't correct it. Somebody's cast-off. Her father had traded 3 months of dock work for it. She couldn't stand in our gravity, not for long. A few steps on a good day holding a rail, and even then you could see it cost her. See the way her jaw set, the way her breath went thin. So the chair was everything. The chair was her legs and her freedom and her dignity, all bolted together into one dented old frame. And here's the thing about Asa that I want you to know before I tell you the ugly part. She was funny. Sharp funny, quiet funny. She'd murmur something under her breath in the middle of a boring lecture, and whoever was next to her would have to fight not to laugh out loud. She drew little sketches in the margins of her tablet, caricatures of the teachers, the station officials, the pompous ones. She had this way of tilting her head and going very still and just, watching people, reading them. I sat 2 rows behind her in systems theory. I never spoke to her. I was too shy, and honestly I was a little afraid of how clever she was. I wish I'd spoken to her. That's one of my regrets from those years. Because I saw what happened to her, and for a long, long time I did nothing. The Karuk did it. You might not know the Karuk, big species, muscular, plated across the shoulders and forearms, tusks that came in during adolescence which made all of them mean for about 2 cycles. They came from a warrior culture, real proud of it, wouldn't shut up about it. Their ancestors this, their honor code that. There were 4 of them who ran the lower corridors of Brightwell like they owned the deck plating. Their leader was a boy named Draven Core, big even for a Karuk, handsome in that way that stupid people mistake for goodness. Teachers loved him. He knew exactly how to smile at an adult, and exactly how to turn that smile off the second they looked away. Draven decided Asa was funny too. Just not the same way. It started small, it always starts small, a shove to her chair as he passed, sending her drifting into the wall. Sorry, didn't see you down there. Big grin, his friends laughing. Then it got clever. They figured out the chair had a manual release. A little latch under the seat, meant for emergencies, meant to let a person lift the frame if the repulsors failed. They figured out that if you hit that latch, the chair dropped. Dead weight. And Asa, hollow-boned, feather-light Asa, would spill out onto the floor in front of everyone. And then they'd take the chair. The first time, I thought it was an accident. I came into the east corridor and there she was on the floor, one arm braced under her, trying to push herself up and not managing it, her legs folded wrong beneath her like a collapsed tent. Her tablet had skidded away. Her sketches were scattered, and her chair was gone. Nobody was helping her. That's the part I can't forget even now. The corridor was full, 30, 40 students, and they just walked around her, stepped over her tablet. A couple of them laughed. Most of them just looked away, the way you look away from something you've decided isn't your problem. Because here's the ugly truth about a crowd. A crowd isn't cruel. A crowd is a coward. A crowd waits to see what everyone else will do, and everyone else is waiting too, and so nothing happens, and the person on the floor stays on the floor. I stopped, I remember stopping, I remember my heart's going fast. And then I remember thinking if I help her, they'll notice me. Draven will notice me, and I kept walking. I've carried that for a long time. I'm not proud of it. I'm telling you because you should know that I was one of the cowards. This isn't a story about how good I was. It's a story about someone who wasn't a coward, and he wasn't even one of us. They found her chair 3 decks down that time, jammed behind a coolant pipe. It took her father 2 hours to get it back, after she finally reached him on her tablet. 2 hours she sat against the corridor wall, refusing to cry where people could see her, her skin gone that pale, scared gray and staying gray. The teachers did nothing. Oh, they said things, they said the right things. We take this very seriously. We'll look into it. But Draven's father was a mid-level trade official with connections up the station hierarchy, and everyone knew it, and so nothing happened. Nothing ever happened. The second time was a week later, same trick. The latch, the drop, the spill, the chair carried off laughing. The third time she stopped bringing the good tablet, because they'd broken the last one. The fourth time she came to school with her father, and he wheeled her all the way to the classroom door himself. And you could see the shame on him, not shame at her, never at her, but the shame of a parent who can't protect his child and knows it. He had to go to work. He couldn't stay all day. And the moment he left, they were on her again. It became a game to them, a daily game. Some mornings they'd let her get all the way to systems theory before they struck, just to make the fall feel further. Some mornings they took the chair before she even reached the atrium. They gave it a name, Draven and his crew. They called it grounding the bird. I heard them say it once, laughing in the corridor, grounding the bird, like it was a sport. And I want you to hold on to how bad it got. Because the worse it got, the more everyone got used to it. That's what horror does when it happens every day. It turns into weather. It turns into just how things are. Kids stopped even reacting to seeing Asa on the floor. It became a normal part of the morning, like the hum of the recyclers. She stopped drawing her little sketches. That's how I knew she was breaking, when the sketches stopped. Now the human. There were only 9 humans at Brightwell in those days. 9, in a school of 2,000. Their families had come out on a resettlement contract at cheap labor for the far docks. That was the deal. That was always the deal for the new species. The galaxy lets you in, then puts you to work in its basements. The humans kept to themselves mostly, had to. You'd hear the things people said about them. That they were violent. That they came from a death world which, actually, turned out to be true but not the way people meant it. That they were emotional, unstable, that they'd never fit into civilized society. I believed some of it back then. I'm ashamed to say I did. The one in my story was named Elias. Elias Vance, 14. Younger than most of us in that year, humans mature on a different clock, small for his age even by human standards. Dark hair he never combed, this gap between his front teeth. He wore the same gray jacket every single day, patched at the elbow, because it was the only warm thing his family had brought out from Earth, and he wouldn't stop wearing it even when it was too small. He didn't say much. His galactic standard was rough back then, heavily accented, and I think he'd learned that the less he talked, the fewer chances people had to laugh at him. So he sat at the back. He watched. He kept his head down. He and Asa had one class together, systems theory. He sat behind her, one row back and to the left. For a long time, I don't think either of them said a single word to the other. I need to tell you about the morning it changed. And I need to tell it right, because I was there, and I've been there in my head 10,000 times since. It was a gray cycle morning. The station ran on artificial day and night, and gray cycle was the transition, half the lights dimmed, the corridors quiet and cold, that hour when everyone's tired and no one's fully awake. Asa came in early. She'd started coming in early, I found out later, hoping to beat Draven's crew to the classroom. It didn't work often, but she kept trying, because that's the thing about her that they never managed to kill. She kept trying. That morning she almost made it. She was maybe 20 meters from the systems theory door. I was behind her, further back, half asleep, dragging my feet. I saw her chair winding along, drifting a little to the left the way it always did, her correcting it, her sketchbook. She'd started drawing again, just a little, just that week, balanced on her lap. And then Draven's crew came out of the side corridor. All 4 of them. They must have been waiting, watching the schedule the way she watched theirs. I stopped walking, same as always, my hearts went fast. Same as always. Draven didn't even hurry. That was the worst part. He strolled. He knew she couldn't run. Where was she going to go? He walked up beside her chair, easy, smiling, and he said something. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her go gray, and then he reached down under the seat. And he hit the latch. The chair dropped. I heard it, that ugly clunk of the repulsor field cutting out, the frame hitting the deck plating. And Asa spilled forward out of it, and this time she couldn't catch herself, and she went down hard on the floor, and her sketchbook flew out of her hands and slid away across the deck, pages fanning open. All her drawings right there, face up, for everyone to see. The little caricatures, the teachers. And I saw this. I was close enough that morning to see it, a drawing of her father, careful and loving, and a drawing of the moon SAE with its low, soft gravity where she could have walked, where she could have run, where she was never on the floor. Draven picked up the sketchbook. He looked at the drawings, and he laughed, and he held one up, the one of her father, and he said loud for the whole corridor, "This is what you do all day, bird, cry over pictures." And he tore the page out. I want you to understand, it wasn't the chair anymore. He could see her chair on the ground. He didn't even care about the chair that morning. He'd found something softer to break. Asa reached up from the floor. "Give it back." Her voice was thin. "Please, that's please." He tore another page. "Please." And now she was crying, and she hated it. You could see how much she hated it, crying in front of them, but she couldn't stop, because he was tearing up her father, her home, her moon, one page at a time, and letting the pieces drift down onto her like snow. The corridor watched. 40 of us, maybe more. I was one of them. I stood there with my 4 arms hanging useless at my sides, and I watched a 15-year-old girl beg on the floor while a bigger boy tore her heart into pieces, and I did nothing, because I was afraid. And then a voice said from the back of the crowd, "Hey." It wasn't loud. That's what I remember. It wasn't a shout. It was almost quiet, but it cut through everything because it was the only voice in that whole corridor that wasn't afraid. Everyone turned. It was the human, Elias, the small one in the too tight gray jacket. He'd come up the corridor behind all of us and he'd stopped, and he was looking at the scene, Asa on the floor, the torn pages, Draven with the book in his big plated hands, and something had changed in his face. I'd never really looked at a human face before that morning. Not properly. We don't have faces like theirs. Ours don't move so much. Human faces are these live, shifting things, every feeling right there on the surface, no way to hide it. That's a big part of why we thought them primitive. Couldn't they control themselves? Couldn't they hide anything? And I watched Elia's face, and I understood all at once that I'd had it backwards my whole life. It wasn't that they couldn't hide what they felt. It was that sometimes they chose not to. He walked forward, small, alone, into a crowd of 40 toward 4 Karak who each outweighed him 3 times over. Draven turned, saw who it was, and grinned because to him this was a gift. This was even better. The animals got something to say. Elias didn't answer him. He walked past Draven, right past him like the huge Karuk wasn't even there, and he knelt down on the deck beside Asa. The whole corridor went silent. I mean truly silent. You could hear the recyclers humming 3 decks down. Nobody had expected this. Draven himself didn't know what to do with it. His fists were half up, ready for a fight, and the human had just ignored him, walked past a raised fist to kneel on the floor. Elias started gathering the pages. That's what he did first. Not the chair, not the fight. The torn pages. He reached out with those funny 5-fingered human hands and he started very carefully collecting the pieces of Asa's sketchbook off the deck, smoothing them, gathering the torn father, the torn moon, gathering them into a stack and holding them out to her. And he said something to her. Low, just for her. I was close, and even I only caught the end of it in his rough, broken galactic standard. Fix these, tape. My dad's got tape, we can fix them. Tape. This tiny human, kneeling in the middle of the worst morning of a girl's life, and his answer to all of it was that his dad had tape and they could fix the pictures. I don't know how to explain what that did to the room. But something in it broke, and something in it started to mend all at once. Asa looked at him, gray-skinned, tear-streaked, this alien boy she'd never spoken to holding out the pieces of her heart and offering to tape them back together. And Draven behind him got his voice back. Get away from her. Elias didn't move. I said get away from the bird animal. Draven kicked the dropped repulsor chair hard and it skidded away down the corridor, sparking and slammed into the far wall. Now the chair was gone too. Now she really had nothing. She stays on the floor, that's where she goes, and you're gonna go down there with her. Elias stood up. He put the pages carefully, I remember how carefully, into Asa's hands first. Made sure she had them. Made sure her fingers closed around them. And then he turned around to face Draven, and he was so small, the top of his head barely reached the Karuk's chest, and he said, She needs her chair. She doesn't get her chair. She needs it. Elias' voice didn't shake. That's the thing I keep coming back to. His hands were shaking, I could see them shaking. He was 14 and terrified, and human bodies show everything, but his voice was flat and level and certain, like he was stating a fact about the universe. You dropped her. She can't walk in this gravity. She needs the chair to get to class, so one of you is going to go get it. Draven laughed, his crew laughed. Or what? And Elias said the thing that got repeated all over the station for cycles afterward. The thing that old officers still quote. He looked up at a boy 3 times his size, in a corridor where nobody had lifted a finger to help, and he said, Or I carry her myself, and you're gonna have to knock me down every single day to stop me, because I'll be here every single day, and you'll get tired before I do." Nobody breathed. You have to understand how alien that was to us. Not the bravery, we had a concept of bravery, the Karuk wouldn't shut up about bravery. But this wasn't the Karuk kind. The Karuk kind of bravery was about winning, about being stronger, about standing over the loser. Elias had already told them he'd lose. That was the whole point of what he said. "I'll be down on the floor. You'll knock me down. I'll be there anyway." He'd looked at a fight he could not win, and he'd said calmly that he would show up and lose it every single day for the rest of the year, rather than let it stand. We didn't have a word for that. I've thought about it for a long time, and I don't think most of the galaxy had a word for that back then, before the humans came. They have one. I learned it later. They call it stubbornness. They say it like it's a small thing, like it's almost a flaw. I think it might be the strongest thing in the universe. Draven shoved him. Of course he did. Draven was 15 and stupid, and he'd been handed an audience, and he wasn't about to back down in front of 40 people to a human half his size. He put one big plated hand on Elias' chest and shoved, hard, and Elias went down onto the deck. Went down hard, I heard it. The corridor flinched, a couple of people made a sound. And Elias got up. Didn't say anything, just got up, wiped his mouth, there was blood, human skin splits easy, and stood back up in front of Draven in the exact same spot, and looked up at him with the exact same flat, certain expression, like the shove had been a comment in a conversation, and he was waiting to hear the rest. Draven shoved him again, harder. He went down again. He got up again. And I watched Draven's face, that handsome, teacher-pleasing face, and I watched something happen to it that I don't think had ever happened to Draven Core before in his life. I watched him get scared. Because he'd realized, slowly, stupidly, but he'd realized. The human meant it. There was no threshold. There was no amount of shoving that was going to make Elias stay down, because staying down was never on the table for him. It wasn't a thing he was considering. It wasn't a card in his hand. He was going to get up. He was going to get up if Draven shoved him 100 times. He was going to get up with broken ribs. He was going to get up bleeding. And every single time he got up, the whole corridor was going to watch a huge Karuk warrior fail to keep one small human boy on the ground. And whatever Draven won by shoving him, he lost more every time in front of everyone. That's the trap Elias had walked into on purpose. That's what you'll get tired before I do meant. It wasn't a boast, it was a strategy. It was the only strategy a small person has against a big one, and it's older than starships. I will make you pay for every inch forever, until it costs you more than it costs me. Draven raised his fist for real this time, not a shove, a fist. His crew went quiet, even they knew this was different, this was past the game now. And that's when the second thing happened, the thing nobody in that corridor expected, least of all me. I moved. I don't know what did it. I've tried to figure it out for cycles. I think it was watching him get up the third time. I think there's a limit to how long you can watch someone braver than you take a beating for someone weaker than both of you, before the shame gets bigger than the fear. I stepped out of the crowd, forearms thin heavy. I planted myself next to the human boy, this human I'd never spoken to, whose name I barely knew, and I said in my deepest, steadiest voice, which was not very steady, "Two of us now." And then a Vanti girl named Sisk stepped out. She was tiny, bird-like, but she stepped out. 3. And a big slow drum boy who never spoke to anyone. 4. And a pair of twins from the hydro deck. 5, 6. And it kept going, one at a time. The crowd, the coward crowd, my crowd, the crowd that had stepped over Asa's tablet for a whole season, came apart, and the pieces of it walked forward, one by one, and stood behind the human boy in the too tight gray jacket. Not all of them. Let me be honest, because this whole story is about honesty. Not all 40. maybe 15 of us in the end. But 15 was enough. 15 was a wall. And Draven Core looked at the wall with his fist still raised, and he understood that the game was over. Not because he'd been beaten, because he'd been seen. We'd all finally just looked at it, straight on. And once a whole corridor is looking straight at a thing, the thing can't keep happening in the dark, and his kind of cruelty only ever worked in the dark. He lowered his fist. He said something about how none of this was worth his time. Real casual, real bored, trying to walk away like he'd chosen to. His crew followed him, muttering. That's how those things always end, not with a bang, but with a bully pretending he had somewhere better to be. But before he went, Elias said one more thing, quiet, just loud enough. The chair. Draven stopped. Go get her chair. And I watched Draven Core, leader of the lower corridors, terror of Brightwell, honored son of the warrior Karuk, walk down that corridor in front of 15 witnesses, pick up the battered second-hand repulsor chair off the floor where he'd kicked it, and bring it back. He didn't apologize. He wasn't built for that, not yet. He just set it down, hard, and left. But he brought it back, and everyone saw him bring it back. And that mattered more than an apology, because an apology is just words. And what we all saw was a bully doing a small kindness with his own hands, because a braver person had made him. The chair was damaged. The repulsor field flickered when Elias reactivated it. Draven's kick had knocked something loose. It would rise a few inches and then stutter and sink. It wasn't going to carry her, not that morning. And the bell for systems theory was going. Asa was still on the floor. She hadn't moved through all of it, couldn't, really, hollow-boned in full gravity. She was pinned there by her own body. She'd watched the whole thing from down at deck level. Watched the human get up 3 times. Watched a corridor grow a spine. She still had the torn pages clutched in her hands. And Elias knelt back down beside her, and the flat, certain look was gone now, and he just looked young and tired and a little scared, blood drying at the corner of his mouth. And he said, "Chair's broke, I'll carry you if that's okay. Is that okay?" He asked. That's the part I always come back to. After everything, he asked. He didn't just scoop her up like a hero in a story. He knelt down and he asked a girl if it was okay for him to help her, because even then, even 14 and bleeding, he understood that her dignity was hers, and it wasn't his to take, not even to save her. Asa looked at him for a long moment. And she nodded. He wasn't strong. I want to be clear about that because the story gets told wrong sometimes, like he swept her up in his big human arms. He didn't. He was a small 14-year-old and he was hurt and she was light but not weightless, and he struggled. He got one arm under her knees and one behind her back, the way she showed him, careful of the hollow bones, and he stood up, and his legs shook, and for a second I thought they'd both go down. Sisk moved to help. Elias shook his head, just slightly, not out of pride, I think. I think he understood something about that moment, that Asa had been carried by machines and dropped by monsters, and what she needed just then was to be carried by a person who had chosen to, on purpose, all the way without help, so that she'd know it was real. So he carried her. Down 20 meters of corridor, shaking the whole way, jaw set, that gap-toothed human face gone tight with effort, and the 15 of us walked alongside, not carrying, just walking, an honor guard for a boy in a patched gray jacket and a girl with a fistful of torn drawings. He carried her through the door of systems theory. And the teacher, who had done nothing all season, who had said the right words and looked away, the teacher stood up from her desk, and her mouth opened and no sound came out. Elias set Asa down in her seat, careful, so careful. And then, because he was 14 and human and didn't know what else to do with a whole room staring at him, he just said, "Her chair's broke. I'll fix it. My dad's got tools." And he went and sat down in his own seat, one row back and to the left, and got out his tablet like it was any other morning. Like he hadn't just changed the whole station. That's most of the story, but not all of it. There's more. What happened after? What happened to Draven? What happened to the two of them? And the thing Asa did a full cycle later that made a station official cry in front of a crowd. And there's the ending line, the one I promised you, the one the old officer stood up for. I'll tell you the rest in a moment. Let me catch my breath. Some stories you have to tell in pieces because telling them all at once costs too much. But I'll leave you, for now, with the thing I understood that morning. The thing that took me the rest of my life to say properly. We'd let the humans in thinking we were doing them a favor. The primitive species, the emotional ones, the animals from the death world. And it turned out the death world had taught them something the rest of the civilized galaxy had forgotten in all its comfort. It had taught them that you get back up. I told you he sat down like it was any other morning, got out his tablet, one row back and to the left. But here's what I noticed, sitting behind both of them in systems theory, when the teacher finally started the lesson and everyone pretended to look at the board. Asa didn't look at the board. She sat very still, the way she did when she was reading a person, that head tilt of hers, but she wasn't tilted toward the front of the room. She was turned just slightly, just enough to keep the human in the corner of her eye, watching him. The way you watch something you can't quite believe is real, in case it disappears when you stop looking. And Elia's, I could see the back of his neck going red. Human thing, blood to the skin. He knew she was watching him and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it, so he stared at his tablet like it held the secrets of the universe and didn't turn a single page for 40 minutes. 14 and 15, two different species, neither one of them said a word. It was, I think, the most anyone at Brightwell had ever said to each other without speaking. The chair took him 3 days to fix. I know because I helped him. That's how I actually met Elias Vance, properly, name to name, after a whole season of sitting behind him and never once turning around. He caught me in the corridor the next gray cycle. Small, gap-toothed, that patched jacket. He came right up to me, no shyness now, or maybe he'd used it all up the day before, and he said, in his rough galactic standard, "You 4 arms, you stepped out first." "Cable," I said. "Elias?" He looked at me for a second, sizing me up the way humans do, all of it right there on his face. Then, you know machines, Gravtech, her chairs Draven kicked, repulsor coils cracked. My dad's got tools, but he doesn't know Loth spec and I don't either. I did as it happened. Thren worked the docks. I'd grown up under my mother's arms while she rebuilt cargo lifters. I knew repulsor coils. So the two of us went down to the human decks after class. I'd never been to the human decks. Nobody went to the human decks. They were down in the underbelly, the cold section near the recyclers, the cheapest berths on Tali's anchorage, where the station gave the newest species the compartments nobody else wanted. The corridors down there were narrow, and the lighting was that harsh dock white that makes everyone look tired. Elias' family had one room. One. For 4 people, him, his father, and his 2 younger sisters. His mother had died on the crossing out from Earth. He told me that flatly, in the corridor, the way you say a thing you've decided not to fall apart about. Bunks folded down from the walls. Everything they owned fit in that one room, and most of it was tools. His father was a big, quiet man with grease permanently in the creases of his hands. He worked the far docks, the dangerous ones, the automated cargo runs where the galaxy sent the workers it didn't mind losing. He looked up when we came in, saw a Thren kid in his doorway, and I braced for, I don't know what, suspicion. The look adults give you. Instead, he wiped his hand on a rag, stuck it out, and said, "You a friend of Elias? Good, he needs some. Sit down, you're too tall for the doorway." And that was that. That was the whole thing. A dockworker who'd lost his wife and crossed half the galaxy to give his kids a cold room next to the recyclers, and his first instinct with a strange alien boy was to feed me. Because there was food, too, some kind of human grain thing, dense and warm, and there wasn't much of it, and he gave me a bowl anyway. I understood something, eating that bowl, that I'm still ashamed took me so long to understand. We'd called them animals from the death world, and they'd have given us their last bowl of food. We fixed the chair on the floor of that one room, the three of us, me, Elias, his father, over 3 evenings. The repulsor coil was cracked, like Elias said. Draven's kick had done it. But here's the thing I found when I got the housing open. It had been cracked before. Small fractures, old ones, stress-lined all through the coil. This chair had been failing for a long time. Every drop, every kick, every time they'd grounded the bird, it had all been slowly killing the one machine that gave Asa her legs. She'd known, I realized. She must have known. Every morning she'd gotten into a chair that was a little closer to dying, and she'd said nothing, because there was no money for another one, and what was the point of naming a problem you couldn't fix? Elia's father looked at the fractured coil for a long time. Then he said, quiet, "This won't hold. We can patch it. It'll last a while, but it's going to fail again." And Elias said, "Then we built her a new one." His father laughed, not unkindly. "With what, son? A low-spec grav coil costs more than I make in." "Then I'll make the money." He was 14. He said it the same flat, certain way he'd told Draven he'd get up every single day, like it was just a fact about the universe that hadn't happened yet. Word had gotten around the station by then, about the corridor, about the human who got up 3 times. Stories move fast on a station, faster than they should. By the end of that week, the whole of Brightwell knew, and by the end of the next, the dockworkers knew, and it had grown in the telling the way stories do. I heard a version where Elias had fought all 4 Karuk and won, which is nonsense. He got shoved down 3 times and bled. That's what actually happened, and that's better than the nonsense version anyway. But here's what the story did. The dockworkers, all species, the whole underbelly of Tali's anchorage, the people who spent their lives in the sections nobody else wanted. They heard about a girl whose chair kept getting stolen and a boy who carried her to class. And they did something the station officials never did. They passed a helmet. That's a dock thing. Old tradition, older than this station. When one of their own is in trouble, someone takes off a work helmet and passes it down the line, and everyone drops in what they can. It's not charity. They'd be insulted if you called it charity. It's just what the docks do, because everyone on the docks knows they're one bad shift away from needing the helmet passed for them. They passed a helmet for Asa's chair. Thren dockworkers, Vanti welders, drum haulers, Karuk, yes, Karuk too, plenty of Karuk worked the docks, and plenty of them were disgusted by what Draven's crew had done, because a real warrior culture has nothing but contempt for 4 strong boys ganging up on one girl who can't stand. Even a couple of the human families, who had the least to give of anyone, dropped in what they had. It wasn't a lot. These were the poorest people on the station, but it was enough. Enough for a real low-spec grav coil, brand new, rated for full station gravity. We built it together. That's the part I'm proudest of in my whole life, honestly, and I've done a lot of things since. A gang of us, me and Elias and his father, and Sisk the Vanti girl who'd said 3, and the big slow drum boy, Alam was his name, who turned out to have the gentlest hands you ever saw for delicate work. We didn't just fix the old chair, we built her a new one. Out in the open, in the dock commons, where anyone could see. Because we'd all learned the lesson of the corridor by then, cruelty lives in the dark, so you do the good thing in the light. And we made it beautiful. That was Elias' idea. He said the old chair was ugly and secondhand, and it had been kicked down 100 corridors, and Asa deserved a chair that looked like it was hers. So Sisk, who could paint, did the frame in the low soft blue of the moon SAE. The blue Asa's skin went when she was calm. And someone welded a little rail along the side where she could clip her sketchbook so it would never fly out and scatter across a floor again. We didn't tell Asa. That was the hard part, keeping it secret for the 11 days it took. She knew something was happening. She's too sharp not to. She'd watch us disappear together after class and come back smelling of coolant and solder, and she'd do her head tilt and she'd say nothing, but you could see her working it out. And you could see, this is the part that got me, you could see her not letting herself hope, because hope had been an expensive thing for Asa. Hope was a chair you got into every morning knowing it might drop you. We gave it to her on a gray cycle morning, in the same corridor. That was deliberate too. Elias planned it. The exact corridor where they'd grounded the bird 100 times. The exact spot where he'd knelt down and gathered the torn pages. We wanted the good thing to happen in the place the bad things had happened, so that every time she went down that corridor after, it would remember something different. Her father was there. Elias had found him, told him, and the man had taken a shift off work he couldn't afford to take off, and he stood at the back with his hands folded and his throat working. And half the school came. Word had spread. The corridor that had once been full of 40 cowards stepping over a girl on the floor was full again, but it was different people now, or the same people become different, and they weren't stepping over anyone. Asa came around the corner in her dying second-hand chair, correcting the drift to the left the way she always did, and she saw all of us standing there, and she saw the new chair, blue as her home, and she stopped. She stopped and she just looked. And Elias stepped forward and said the least graceful, most human thing, which was, it doesn't drift left. We fixed the drift. And the coil's rated for full G, so it won't drop. It can't drop. We made sure it can't drop. It can't drop. That's what he led with. Not it's beautiful, though it was. Not we all built it for you. Not the whole dock chipped in. He led with it can't drop, because he'd understood, this 14-year-old from a cold room by the recyclers, that the thing that had been broken in Asa was never really her legs. It was the falling. It was living every day one latch click away from the floor. And he'd built her a machine that couldn't drop her, and he handed it to her by promising her, first thing, the one thing she'd needed to hear for a whole season. You're not going to fall anymore. Asa cried. But not the way she'd cried on the floor. This was different. This was the kind of crying that doesn't fold you up, the kind that stands you taller. Her father came forward and lifted her, carefully, hollow-boned, the way you handle something you love that's fragile out of the old dying chair and into the new one. And she settled into it, and it held her steady, no flicker, no stutter, no drift, full G rated, solid as the deck. And she sat there in the low blue chair the color of her lost moon, in the corridor where she'd been broken 100 times, surrounded by 15 kids who'd built it and a father who couldn't speak, and a small human boy with a gap in his teeth. And she did the thing that I told you about at the start, the thing that made a station official cry a full cycle later, except it started here. She reached into the little welded rail along the side, and she took out her sketchbook, the same one. Taped, actually taped, Elias' dad's tape, just like he'd promised in the worst moment, the torn father and the torn moon mended back together with clear human tape. And she opened it to a fresh page, and she started to draw. Right there, in front of everyone. She drew fast, the way she did when she really saw something, and when she was done she turned the sketchbook around and held it up for the corridor. It was Elias. Not how he looked, how he was, small in the too-tight gray jacket, chin up, and behind him she'd drawn all of us, me with my 4 arms, Sisk, Alam, the twins, but small in the background because we'd come second, and in front of him on the ground she'd drawn the fallen chair, and Elias was between the chair and everyone else, standing over it, guarding it. Guarding the thing that gave her her legs. She'd titled it, in loath script along the bottom, and under it, in careful galactic standard so everyone could read it. The one who wouldn't stay down. That's the drawing that ended up in front of the station official. Because here's what happened a full cycle later, and it's the last thing I'll tell you, and it's the reason the old officer stood up in the back of that room and said it happened. I was there too. The story of the corridor got too big to stay on the docks. It climbed. Stories do that on a station. They start in the underbelly and they climb, deck by deck, until one day they reach the upper sections where the officials live, the ones with the grav harnesses and the clean corridors and the connections. A cycle later, Tali's anchorage held one of its ceremonies. The council does this, hands out little commendations to worthy citizens, mostly officials giving medals to other officials, all of them from the good species, the pure-blood academy types. A closed, polished, upper-deck thing. And that cycle, for reasons I never fully learned, I think a dockworker's story reached someone with a conscience, which does happen, even up there, even rarely. That cycle they announced they'd give a youth commendation. And they'd chosen the human, Elias Vance, for conduct reflecting the values of the station. They meant it as a nice gesture, a photo. Look how progressive Tali's anchorage is, giving a medal to one of the primitive new species. I don't think they understood the story at all. I think they'd heard a sanded-down version. Brave boy helps disabled classmate, very heartwarming, good for the station image. Elias almost didn't go. He hated that kind of thing. But his father told him to go because his father understood something Elias didn't yet. That sometimes you show up to a thing you hate so you can say a true thing in a room that needs to hear it. So he went. In the gray jacket, still too small for him, even a cycle later, he wouldn't give it up. And when they called him up and the official started reading the polished little speech about station values, Elias did the human thing, the thing we'd once thought made them primitive. He didn't control his face, and he didn't stay quiet. He asked if he could say something. And a room full of officials, not able to say no in front of the crowd, said yes. And this small human boy stood up in a room full of the most powerful people on the station, the ones with the grav harnesses and the clean corridors, and he said, I'm telling you what he said as close as I can remember it, because I was there, I was in the back, we all were, the whole dock came up for it and packed the room. He said I didn't do anything. I got up off the floor a few times, that's easy, anyone can get up off a floor. He said, the thing you should give a medal to is a chair that can't drop. My friend Asa needed one for 3 years and nobody up here gave her one. The docks gave her one. People who have nothing gave her one. And she'd been getting dropped in front of teachers, in front of officials, every single day, and all of you up here knew, and nobody came down. The room went very quiet. And he held up the drawing, Asa's drawing, the one who wouldn't stay down, he'd brought it, and he said, she drew this for me, but she got the title wrong. It's not about me. And he turned it slowly so the whole room could see the 15 of us drawn small in the background and Asa's father and the docks. It's about all of them. It's about everyone who finally looked. That's the thing that fixed it, not me getting up, everyone else finally looking. And then he did the thing that made the station official cry. He walked over off the little stage into the crowd, which you're not supposed to do, and he found Asa, who'd come in her low blue chair that couldn't drop. And he handed her the drawing back, and he handed her the medal too, set it right in her lap, and he said, loud enough for the room, this is hers. She's the one who kept coming back. Every day they dropped her, and every day she came back. I only had to get up 3 times. She got up every day for 3 years alone before any of us showed up. And that's when the official cried. He was an old councilman, upper deck, grav harness, the whole polished thing. The kind of man who'd looked away his whole life, I imagine, because looking away is how you keep a clean corridor. And he stood there at the front of a room he'd meant to use for a nice photograph. And he watched a 14-year-old give away his own medal to a girl in a wheelchair, and something in the old man's face came apart. He didn't make a speech about it, to his credit. He just took off his own commendation, a real one, an old one, something he'd earned or been given decades back. And he came down off the stage too, and he set it in Asa's lap next to the other one, and he said, quiet just to her, but the room was so silent that we all heard it. I'm sorry it took us so long to come down. Draven wasn't there. I know you're wondering. He'd been quietly transferred off station a few months after the corridor, his father's connections, moved somewhere the story wouldn't follow. That's how it goes for the Dravens of the galaxy sometimes. They don't always get what they deserve. I won't lie to you and tell you he got some grand comeuppance, because he didn't, and I'd rather tell you the truth. But I'll tell you the last thing I know about him, which I only learned cycles later, second-hand, and can't fully verify, so take it as you like. Someone said that at his new school, on his first day, he saw a group of bigger kids ganging up on a smaller one. And someone said he stopped it. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's the kind of thing stories add on because we want it to be true. I genuinely don't know. But I've decided to believe it, and I'll tell you why. Because Elia's whole point, that morning in the corridor, was that the thing that fixes cruelty isn't punishment. It's being seen. It's a whole room finally looking straight at a thing. And if a room full of witnesses looking straight at Draven Core planted one seed of shame deep enough that it grew into a boy who broke up a fight a cycle later on a station far away, then that's a better ending than any comeuppance, because it means the getting up spread. It means it got into even him. Asa and Elia stayed friends, all through Brightwell and after. She became an engineer, gravtech, of course, what else? She designs mobility frames now for low-gravity species living in high-gravity places, chairs that can't drop. She's built thousands of them. There are kids all over the coreward lanes gliding to class in Asa's chairs, who will never once in their lives know the specific terror of a latch click under their seat. And that's her whole life's work. And she'll tell you flatly that it started with one human boy and one roll of tape. Elias joined the docks with his father for a while, then went further the service, eventually. He's the reason old officers stand up in the backs of rooms when this story gets told. He never got tall, never combed his hair. I saw him a few cycles ago and he was still wearing a gray jacket, a new one but gray, always gray, and I asked him about it and he just grinned that gap-toothed grin and said his mother had liked gray. And me, I fix things still. I've spent my whole life with my 4 arms deep in the guts of machines that carry people, making sure they don't drop anyone. I never became brave exactly. Not the way he was. I froze in that corridor, and I've never forgotten that I froze. But I stepped out, eventually. I was the first one to step out after him, and I've held on to that because it turned out that all it took was one person to be brave first, and then the rest of us, the cowards, the crowd, the weather, we could find it. We just couldn't find it first. We needed someone to go first. The whole galaxy needed someone to go first. That's the story. That's what happened at Brightwell, on the underbelly of Tali's anchorage, back when they'd only just let the humans in and we still thought we were doing them a favor. I've told it 40 times. I'll tell it 40 more. Because the young cadets always ask me the same thing at the end. They ask what the lesson is, what they're supposed to take from it, like there's a neat little moral to fold up and put in a pocket. And I always tell them the same thing. The thing Elias never said out loud but proved with his own body, 3 times on a cold deck, in front of a crowd of people who'd already given up. The strongest thing in the universe isn't the biggest fist. It isn't the oldest bloodline or the cleanest corridor or the fanciest grav harness. It isn't even courage exactly, because courage comes and goes and most of us don't have much of it when the moment actually comes. The strongest thing in the universe is a person who has decided they will not stay down. Everything else, the medals, the friendships, the chairs that can't drop, the whole corridor finally turning to look, all of it grows from that one small, stubborn, unkillable thing. You get back up. That's the whole secret. That's the thing the death world taught them, and the thing they taught the rest of us, and the thing I'm telling you now so you can tell it to someone else someday. However many times they drop you. You get back up.